with a relatively young earth. You know, how can you stretch millions and billions if the reality is God says, hey, from the beginning of creation there were males and females. First male's name was Adam, and oh, by the way, here's the genealogy from Adam to Christ. The problem is that by age 5, our kids have already been indoctrinated. And you think about it for just a moment. How many 5-year-olds are not absolutely enthralled with the dinosaurs? Kids love them. And you think about it for just a moment. They know their names. They know all kinds of trivia about them. My second son, when he was just about 2 years old, for the life of him, he couldn't say the words apple juice. He said it with a Z. It was apple juice. But at age 2, he could rattle off dinosaur names like nobody's business. We would sit on the couch and we'd take one of those big picture books, and he'd say, look, Dad, there's a Brachiosaurus, a Spinosaurus, Tyrannosaurus Rex. Could you give me some apple juice? Kids love them. In fact, I tell parents, if you have not stepped on a plastic dinosaur figurine in the middle of the night, you're not qualified as a parent. But it's not just children. Adults also are very much infatuated with these amazing creatures. And as such, magazines, they know that. They basically put their picture on the cover knowing that that's going to basically guarantee increased sales. And so they tell us where they were discovered, some in this state. They tell us what they think they ate. All kinds of amazing things, like, for instance, the largest dinosaur ever discovered. A creature called the Argentinosaurus. And I bet you can't guess where they found it. Texas. No, I'm just kidding. In fact, if you want to see a replica of this guy, you've got to go to the Fernbank Museum in Atlanta, Georgia, where he stretches literally from one end of the museum to the next. In fact, to give you a perspective of how big this creature is, look on the far right side of the screen. That's a full-size T-Rex. That T-Rex does not even come up to this guy's hip bone. But guys, it's because of dinosaurs that we really are losing many of our kids. Because think about it for just a moment. They become infatuated before age 5. How many of our kids can actually harmonize it with God's Word? So let's do this. Let's take a walk for just a moment through the life of a child. We're going to start out at age 2, 3, 4 years of age, where we fill our homes with all kinds of dinosaur paraphernalia. We've got games. We've got toys. In fact, some of you grandparents in this room, you bought the books. You know those books that start out by saying, dinosaurs walked the earth millions of years ago, long before man ever did. Our child hits about 4, 5, and we start getting ready in the morning. We tear open that instant oatmeal. All of a sudden, they're already reading about evolution. They hit 6, they're eating everything in the house. They want snacks, so we give them snacks that are teaching them evolution. They hit about 7 years of age, and finally we feel like, okay, they're good enough that we can take them out in public. So we're going to take them to a fine dining establishment, somewhere like Wendy's. They're sitting in the back, all the while they're learning about evolution. Or maybe they don't like Wendy's. Maybe your child likes Arby's. So we go to Arby's, do the drive-thru, lo and behold, guess what they're learning about? Evolution. They hit 9, 10. They start taking field trips locally to some of the museums where they start to be indoctrinated with this idea of ancient ages. They maybe hit off to the Smithsonian Institute there in D.C. Or maybe they make it down to the Field Museum or the Fernbank Museum in Atlanta, or the Field Museum in Chicago, where Sue is on display. Now, take a look for just a moment. How many of the parents of the children you're looking at on the screen, how many of those parents do you think actually thought about what their kids would be reading when they signed those permission slips? Because I actually took that picture, and I also took a picture of what they're reading, And folks, listen to me. There's no way to harmonize what they're reading with God's Word. They hit 11. They start watching movies that talk about dinosaurs. They hit 12. They start reading chapter books. All right, let's stop right here. Can I see a show of hands of all the young people in the room that are familiar with the Magic School Bus? Real high. Take a look, moms and dads. That's a very, very popular kids series. You open it up. Notice what? Little boy's got a picture of a dinosaur chasing a caveman. Take a look at what it says. This story is make-believe. That there were no dinosaurs in the time of cave people. Top left corner says, no people ever saw a dinosaur. When early humans appeared on the earth, dinosaurs had already been dead for millions of years. People found out about dinosaurs from fossils. Or maybe your child likes The Magic Treehouse, another very popular kids series. In fact, I would point out, you'll notice this is research guide number 1. Why do you think it's number 1? Because if you want to hook a kid, you know what you use? Use dinosaurs. This one, you open it up, we're not even to the end of the book. We're still in the introduction, and it says human beings, of course, had not yet evolved. In fact, in the middle of that particular book, it's got that timeline. Millions of years ago, finally giving rise to human beings. Your child hits 12, 13. Now they're taking science classes. In fact, they've taken a science class titled Evolution Change Over Time. They get a Prentice Hall science book. So we ask this simple question. Do they use dinosaurs to teach our kids evolution? Well, let's see. We find them on page 10, on page 16, on page 25, 28, 29, 36, 38, 39, 46, 66, page 96, page 97, page 98, page 99, page 100. In fact, in 100-page textbooks, 32 of them, that's 1 out of every 3 pages, has a picture of dinosaurs on it. You know why we're talking about it? Because, folks, this is usually the sugar stick candy that they hook our kids with. This is the very first introduction that our kids normally get with that godless theory of evolution. I mean, think about it. You say, okay, what's the big problem? Let me make sure everybody in here understands the dilemma. Right now, our kids are being taught in textbooks that dinosaurs died out 65 million years ago, and that we came along carrying our clubs roughly 3 million years ago. And yet, the Bible paints a totally different picture. The Bible paints a very young earth. And not only that, it says we were created on the same day. All land-dwelling creatures were created on day 6. What day was man created on? Do you realize what that means? That means we would have had to have coexisted. Now I realize right now there's at least a handful of you that are sitting there thinking, there's no way that's possible. That's not right. That's not what I learned. Well, folks, I promise you, this won't be the last time I'm going to turn your whole world upside down. Hopefully that'll happen a couple of times. But by the time you leave here, I want you to ask yourself honestly, have I really been exposed to the evidence? You know, the question is not did they exist. The real question is when did they walk the earth? Because we know they did. We found their fossilized remains on all 7 continents, Arctic to Antarctic and everywhere in between. In fact, I was getting off a plane in Oregon, was going home, had a preacher friend call me. He said, Brad, we need you to come to our congregation. I thought he meant for a seminar. I was like, okay, I think I got an opening in 2012. He said, no, now. He said, we got bones. I'm sitting there on the phone thinking, okay, I've heard people like passing snakes and doing all kinds of... Sure enough, I show up. They were digging an elevator shaft. And at the bottom of that shaft were all kinds of bones. We spent hours digging them out, measuring them, taking pictures. In fact, I've got pictures in my computer. If anybody ever tells you there's not dinosaurs in the church, I got pictures of them. Folks, the real question is, when did they exist? Philip Kitcher wrote a book in which he said, solid evidence for the coexistence of dinosaurs and humans would shake the foundations of the evolutionary theory. Because, of course, dinosaurs are supposed to have been long extinct by the time hominids arrived on the scene. I want every set of eyes in here to remember what he's saying right there. Solid evidence of humans coexisting with dinosaurs would shake the foundation of the evolutionary theory. Because I'm going to show you some evidence. Some evidence that you're not going to see from CNN, Time Magazine, or in your child's textbooks. Because, folks, listen to me, they've done a tremendous job of brainwashing us. National Geographic GeoGuide page, very first sentence. No human being has ever seen a live dinosaur. You know, in order to make that particular statement, the author of this article realistically should have asked every human being, you think he did that? Nope. Before I share that evidence with you, allow me to give you about a 2-minute history lesson that's going to be important a little bit later on as we get down the line in this lesson. The word dinosaur itself actually came into existence in the year 1845. Now I want you to kind of put that up here, scroll it on a piece of paper. 1845, a guy by the name of Sir Richard Owen actually came up with the term using 2 Greek words, Dinosaurus, translated by him as fearfully great lizard. Now that was 1845. Since that time, our fascination has done nothing but increase. We've made movies about them. We've got all kinds of books about them. The question is not, did they exist? Moms and dads, listen to me. We did our children a great disservice 30, 40 years ago. And some of you in this room know what I'm talking about. We told people in the church that they were mythological, that they didn't really exist. Or we did another disservice by saying, well, God just buried those bones for us to dig up later. Folks, God's not the God of chaos. They definitely existed. And as I said, the question is not, did they exist? The question is when. So let's look at some evidence together. Hopefully by the end of this hour, all of us in this room can discern when they existed. We'll start January 2005. Research study that was barely reported, very quietly. American researchers discovered a dinosaur in the belly of a mammal. You say, yes, so what? What's the big deal? Well, don't forget the fact that mammals allegedly didn't come until millions of years later. Or maybe somebody could explain to me the Ica stones of Peru. A gentleman by the name of Dr. Javier Cabrera was given one of these stones as a birthday gift from a native there in Peru, native farmer. He asked the farmer, he said, hey, where'd you get this? The farmer said, oh, these are burial stones. Burial stones that the ancient Incan Indians would place in their tombs. Well, Dr. Cabrera set out to find as many of these burial stones as he could. All told, he found about 11,000 of them. Over a third of which show very elegant pictures of dinosaurs on them. But not just dinosaurs. They actually have dinosaurs and men. In fact, if you look carefully right here at the bottom, you got a guy who's in full Incan drab. He's hunting it. You say, oh, Brad, surely those are like an internet hoax. Folks, listen to me. The Incas, they got details right that we would not understand for literally hundreds of years later. I'll give you one example. I could give you 3. If you look on the screen on the left, you'll notice there are 3 Ica stones outlined in yellow. There are sauropod dinosaurs that have these dermal frills on their back. For the longest time, American researchers said, that's not right. We have never found a sauropod dinosaur that has these dermal frills on his back. They thought his back was smooth. Well, that was until about 1992, when in fact that's exactly what we found. Take a look. The article itself is called New Look for Sauropod Dinosaurs. Recent discovery of fossilized sauropod skin impressions reveals a significantly different appearance for these dinosaurs. Fossilized skin demonstrates that a median row of spines was present. In other words, the ancient Incas got it right the first time. Ellen Morse Bishop, commenting on it, she said, the biggest spines found were about 9 inches long, shaped a little bit like a shark's dorsal fin. The smallest at the tail tip were about 3 inches high. Or maybe somebody could explain to me the dinosaur figurines from Acapulco. Gentleman, when he was riding on the back of a horse, from that elevated position, he found the first of these ceramic figurines. All told, they found about 30,000 of these. About 2 months ago, I got a phone call at my office. Lady identified herself as the director of the Acapulco Museum. I have no idea how she found me or my name, my company. She said, I understand that you believe in God. I said, absolutely. She said, I understand you're also a creationist. I said, absolutely. She said, I am too. I want you to come to our museum and film these figurines. I want you to make a documentary. Lord willing, in the next 2 or 3 months, we're heading down there to do that. Because you see, here's the interesting thing about these figurines. They sent off little pieces of them. Like a little piece of a foot, a little piece of a tail, to 2 labs here in the United States. University of Pennsylvania and Teledyne Laboratories. They didn't tell them it came from dinosaur figurine. They just said, hey, will you date this? They did. Came back with dates of 2000 BC. To which they said, whoa, that would kind of indicate that the people saw them. They sent additional samples to be what's called thermoluminescent tested. They really wanted to make sure they had this thing right. They came back with dates of roughly 2000 BC. And that's when they made their mistake. Before both laboratories certified their findings in writing, they called them up. They said, hey, you know that stuff we're sending you? It's coming from dinosaur figurines. And both labs did the same thing. They withdrew their results. Said, we're sorry, we weren't able to give you any accurate readings on your findings. 1990, we called them though. 1990, we sent some dinosaur bone off to the University of Arizona. Didn't tell them it was dinosaur bone. We said, hey, can you date this? They did. It came back with dates of roughly 9,000 years before present. Now granted, that's not 6,000. But that's a far cry from 65 million, isn't it? Or maybe somebody could explain to me this Buddhist temple, 800 years old, that was uncovered 3 short years ago in Cambodia. Now folks, listen to me. You can't fake this one. It has been completely covered over in vegetation. If you look, you'll see the limbs, the trees, the roots all over the place. They came in with what you and I would call industrial strength Roundup. Killed everything. They pulled back the vines. When they did that, they noticed these elegant carvings. Like for instance, if you look carefully, this guy right here, that's a monkey. You see his face, his front legs, back legs, his tail. This guy, some of you may have on your wall, it's a deer. You see his antlers, his tail in the up position, back legs, front legs. But the artist, he didn't just stop with things like monkeys and deers. He also carved things like dinosaurs. How did he know what to carve if he'd never seen it? In fact, some friends of mine have actually been over there. They've taken pictures for me. They had a tour guide who was walking them through. They came up to this wall. They're clicking away. They asked the tour guide, they said, hey, whoa, how do you explain this? Tour guide smiles. He says, I know what you're thinking. I'm supposed to tell you, though, that it's a porcupine. I've seen porcupines. That's not one of them. Or maybe somebody could explain to me this child's poncho that a buddy of mine, Dennis Swift, discovered in the tomb of a child that was about 9 years old. Or maybe somebody could explain to me the petroglyphs at National Bridges National Monument. Now, if you were to go there today, there are 3 sandstone bridges, one of which is called Kachina. These are sitting just outside of Blanding, Utah. It's on that particular sandstone bridge that the Anasazi Indians, they carved all kinds of things. You can go there today. You can still see, for instance, you can see bighorn sheep, and you can see things like dinosaurs. In fact, I want you to read with me what Fran Barnes said. Understand, this guy is an evolutionist, but he's also a recognized authority on rock art. Take a look at what he says. There's a petroglyph in National Bridges National Monument that bears a striking resemblance to a dinosaur. Why did he just call it a dinosaur? Because solid evidence of humans coexisting with dinosaurs would shake the foundation of the evolutionary theory. Moms and dads, I want you to remember the next two slides. And the reason I say that, they're not the prettiest, they're not the flashiest, but when you understand they're coming to us from historians who have seen flying reptiles. You see, on those same bridges, they have those pterodactyls, pteranodons, you know what I'm talking about? But according to evolutionary theory, those things died out with the dinosaur 65 million years ago. So maybe somebody in here could explain to me what, for instance, Herodotus, Greek historian, 5th century BC. Take a look at what he says. There's a place in Arabia to which I went on a hearing of some winged serpents. When I arrived there, I saw bones and spines of serpents in such quantities as it would be impossible to describe. The form of the serpent is like that of a water snake, but he has wings without feathers, and like as possible to the wings of a bat. Or maybe somebody could explain to me the writings of Josephus, another historian. In fact, he's a historian that might trigger a memory because this is the guy that chronicled the death of Jesus Christ at the hands of Pilate. He was living at the same time our apostles were walking the earth, and he also was talking about flying reptiles. Now, folks, get that for just a moment. Same guy who wrote about Jesus Christ being crucified is also writing about flying reptiles. What does that do to the evolutionary theory, keeping in mind Charles Darwin wasn't even a thought? Or maybe somebody could explain to me this textile that's in the Museum of Peru, identified as a dinosaur. Or maybe you could explain to me the tomb of Richard Bell. If you ever get over to England, let me encourage you to walk through the Carlisle Cathedral. You see here. Have them roll up this carpet you see right there at the bottom of the screen. Because below that is the tomb of a guy who died in 1496. Now, do you remember when I told you the word dinosaur was coined? 1845. And in round numbers, this guy died about 350 years before the word even came into existence. When you have them roll up that carpet, you'll notice that elegant tomb below. And when you get down on your hands and knees, you can start making out animals. And you'll see, for instance, dogs, you'll see foxes, you'll see eels, and you'll see dinosaurs. 350 years before the word came into existence. Or maybe somebody can explain to me this Mayan vase. Or these textiles. By the way, if you haven't noticed, I am quite literally bouncing you from continent to continent to continent. On purpose. How about North America? We'll come back home for a moment. Samuel Hubbard was the curator of the Oakland, California Museum of Natural History. He believed that the American Indians had been on this continent for much longer than we were giving them credit for. So he set out with an expedition down into the Grand Canyon, off one of the side canyons called the Havasupai Canyon. He was looking for proof that yes, the Native Americans had been here. He was looking for their pottery, their clothing, anything that would say yes, they were here. And he found his proof. He found their clothing. He found their pottery. But he also stumbled across their cave art. Etched into those canyon walls were pictures that had taken men hours to carve out. They say, all right, pictures of what? Well, let's see. There's buffalo, sheep, dinosaurs, oxen, men. Run that list by me one more time. Buffalo, sheep, oxen, men, and dinosaurs. In fact, I want you to read with me what Dr. Hubbard had to say regarding his find. He said, taken all in all, the proportions are good. The huge reptile is depicted in the attitude in which man would most likely see it. Reared on its hind legs, balancing with a long tail, either feeding or in a fighting position, possibly defending itself against a party of men. He goes on to say, the fact that some prehistoric man made a pictograph of a dinosaur on the walls of this canyon upsets completely all of our theories regarding the antiquity of man. The fact that the animal is upright and balanced on his tail would seem to indicate that the prehistoric artist must have seen it alive. Now, I brought a picture of what Dr. Hubbard found, and I hate to be the one to tell you guys, that right there is not a sheep. It's not an ox, but it's an awfully good representation of a dinosaur we now know existed called the Atlantosaurus. For those of you who are trivia buffs, this little white dot you're looking at, that would be a bullet hole from an evolutionist who was trying to get rid of the evidence. Or maybe somebody can explain to me the soft tissue that was discovered recently in a T-Rex bone. I actually talked to the lady who made this discovery. Her name was Mary Schweitzer. She shared with me, she said it was really a serendipitous event that they found it at all. It was by accident. They had the femur, the long bone of the T-Rex. They were trying to get it on a helicopter to get it back to a lab. She said it was too big. So they knew they were going to have to cut it. She said, well, we cut it right down the middle. And when we did that, we were able to actually look inside where we found soft tissue, blood vessels, and what she thinks are blood cells. Now, folks, you ask any molecular biologist worth their salt at all, they'll tell you soft tissue, blood vessels, blood cells, they don't stick around for 65 million years. You know, one of the things that I did during my training, we dissected lots and lots of bodies. You guys probably watch shows like CSI, Law and Order. You know, when somebody dies, they send a forensic pathologist out to try to figure out how long they've been dead. Okay, well, that's Hollywood. But there is a real place just outside of Knoxville, Tennessee. It's called the Body Farm. And it's real. It is a place in which human bodies are donated to science and they are left in every condition imaginable. They are left partially buried, partially clothed, frozen, by lakes, by rodent hills, up in trees. You name it, we've done it to them. To see how quick bodies decompose. In fact, they have developed one of the best databases, quite literally, all over the world. They have people from all over the world calling them saying, hey, here's the condition that we found the body in. Can you set it up to tell us how long it took to get that way? And folks, I'm here to tell you, if you've got soft tissue, blood vessels, blood cells, that creature's not been dead over 1,000 years, period. Now you think about it for just a moment. We are quite literally pulling protein from dinosaur bones, and yet our kids will never know. I asked Mary Schweitzer the one question that I thought was pertinent. I said, why do you think it is we've never found soft tissue in any other dinosaur bone? Her answer sent a chill right up my back. She said, maybe it's because we've never thought to look. Since her discovery, we found soft tissue in 3 other dinosaur discoveries. Or maybe somebody could explain to me pottery found in the tombs of South America. Or maybe these burial clothes that show dinosaur-like creatures. Or maybe somebody could explain to me this Roman mural, 2nd century AD. Keeping in mind that's hand-laid tiles, folks. Or maybe you can explain to me this Mesopotamian cylinder seal that looks an awful lot like an Apatosaurus. Or maybe these tablets that are attributed to Narmer, the legendary first pharaoh of United Egypt. Get the point? Folks, listen to me, and I'm not exaggerating. I could stand up here for another 15, 20 minutes and click slide after slide after slide. But don't think they're going to show this to your kids. Because I promise you this, you give me a child for a couple of hours, you let me show them the evidence, and they will forever question the evolutionary theory. Because our kids aren't dumb. You say, okay, Brad, obviously there's some stuff out there we haven't seen, but are there any other examples of animals that allegedly live before man? Well, let's go all the way back. Let's go all the way back to what evolutionists would say is the earliest of creatures. On the screen you see a trilobite. To our knowledge, they are extinct. On the screen you see they date them 500 to 600 million years old, but I want you to notice this little word right here. They call them index fossils. Meaning anywhere you find a trilobite, by definition, you are in the oldest layer of dirt possible. Now, they range anywhere in size from about the size of my thumb to the size of a small orange. Actually, I've got a couple on my desk. In fact, my wife is driving around with one in the car right now. I bought one when we were out west recently. The only problem with their whole little deal, take a look at this timeline. They've got trilobites way down here, right? They got early fish coming in here, then you got the dinosaurs, early mammals. We would be at the very top of the screen, separated in time by allegedly 500 to 600 million evolutionary years. The only problem with that is in 1969, a gentleman by the name of William Meister, he and 7 of his friends who were there to witness this event, they were out looking for trilobite fossils. They're tapping open rocks. They scaled up a little ledge in Antelope Springs, Utah. They climbed up. They're tapping rocks. Well, Meister hit one. And it split into 2 beautiful halves. And he found 2 trilobites embedded in the sandal print of a human being. Now, folks, think about that for just a moment. You just collapsed that whole column. Because you got trilobites and humans together. In fact, I've seen it. I had to take it out of a lockbox in Texas. I've been told you can see the sandal stitching on this fossil. There's no getting around it. You've got a human sandal print with 2 trilobites in it. The guy who owns it, he told me, he said, I've been offered over $2 million by evolutionists who told him all they want to do is destroy it. Or how about this one? This is another favorite for the textbooks. Here you got this creature that allegedly walked out of the water onto the beach. Now, the young people will remember this because I just told them, if this is true, not only do you have to get rid of scales, you got to quickly evolve sweat glands, you got to quickly evolve the lacrimal ducts, the tear ducts, because you're not in water anymore. You got to quickly evolve a new respiratory system, but you also have to convince your girlfriend to go with you. Because it's no good if it's just a male or a female, right? And yet we're still teaching that this was what gave rise to the dinosaurs. They put this creature at roughly 500 or 350 million years old, 250 to 350. Everything revolves around his funny little front lobe fin. If you look right there, you'll notice. So here we've got a creature that allegedly gave rise to the dinosaurs. The only problem with that is we know they didn't live 325 to 410 million years ago. They're actually very much alive today. You see, they've been catching them off the coast of India and Madagascar. The natives there, they call them junk fish. Now here's the really funny part. We assume, because we found some fossils that had these funny little front fins, we assumed that was a missing link. That this was a shallow water fish that crawled out on land. Guess what? It's a deep water fish. It actually lives below the 18-degree isotherm. You look at me and you say, okay, that's nice and all. But Brad, you still haven't answered a major question. You're going to stand up there and tell us that God created man and dinosaurs on day 6. Yep. Then why aren't they mentioned in the Bible? It's not a fair question. And let me explain what I mean by that. You remember when I told you the word dinosaur was coined? 1845. When was your Bible translated into English? Well, King James Version, 1611. Okay, how do you get a word in a book that's translated in 1611 if that word doesn't come along for another 234 years? A better question would be for you to ask me, is there compelling evidence of dinosaur-like creatures in this book? Now that is a fair question. And in that, I would say, turn with me and let's look at the book of Job together. We could look at the book of Isaiah. We could look at the book of Psalm. I just love the book of Job. Take a look. Very opening chapter, we're introduced to a guy who is smitten with some trials that I don't think anybody in this room really can comprehend. He loses his wealth. His flocks are gone. He then is smitten by losing all of his kids. I got 4 kids. Folks, I got to tell you, that kind of news, that would be a blow, would it not? If that's not enough, they then go after his health. The text talks about him having boils from the crown of his head to the bottom of his feet. Now, let me tell the teens, this ain't like acne. You read it here, he was taking ceramic pottery and scraping pus out of these boils. This was nastiness. In fact, take a look. Job chapter 2, his wife says, why don't you just curse God and die? But he doesn't do that. Because very soon after she makes that foolish statement, Job's 3 friends come on the scene. And I would put that in parentheses on purpose because they're not what you and I would call friends. What they really are is nosy. They're busybodies. In fact, you may have friends like these. What they really assumed was that Job had sinned big time. And God was paying it back. And they wanted to know what he did. So what you're going to read in the Bible over the next 25 plus chapters is a running dialogue between Job and these 3 guys. Now obviously I'm paraphrasing it. But it goes something like this. Eliphaz comes up and says, Job, what'd you do? Job says, I didn't do anything. Friend number 2. Bildad tags in and says, come on now, Job. We can look at your life. We know you've done something. What'd you do? He says, I didn't do anything. Friend number 3, Zophar, tags in and says, come on now, Job. You tell us we're your friends. And again, Job says, look, I didn't. In fact, finally, in a fit of anger, he burst out and he requests to speak to God. Take a look. Job chapter 13, verse 22, he phrases it this way. He says, then you speak and I'll answer you, or let me speak and you respond to me. He's telling God, look, I don't care. You go first or I'll go first. It doesn't matter. Well, in Job chapter 38, we have God's response. Take a look. Job 38. The Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind and has said, who is this who darkens counsel by words without knowledge? Now prepare yourself like a man. I will question you and you will answer me. God says, you want to talk? We're fixing to have a talk. Except I'm going to be the one doing all the talking. And for the next 3 chapters, God deluges Job with question after question after question. Take a look. He says, where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth, Job? Hey, Job, where's the dwelling place of light? Job, you see the eagle and the hawk? How do they fly? Job, what about snow and hail? How do I make those? Hey, Job, what about the behemoth? Job chapter 40, verse 15. Look now at the behemoth which I made along with you. He eats grass like an ox. See now his strength is in his stomach muscles. He moves his tail like a cedar. What in the world? What's a behemoth? And somebody says, well, I'm so glad you are here because my Bible tells you exactly what it is. I got a little footnote that says it's either elephant or hippopotamus. Well, let me remind you that your little footnotes are not inspired, are they? But I'll go along with you. Let's take a look. What is the description of this creature? Verse 16. Lo, now his strength is in his loins, the force is in the navel of his belly. Obviously, this is a creature with a large stomach, right? That guy have a big belly? Yep. That guy have a big belly? Yep. That guy have a big belly? Yep. Keep reading. Job chapter 40, verse 17. He moveth his tail like a cedar, the sinews of his stones are wrapped together. And friends, when it talks about cedars here, it's going to be talking about some of the largest of trees. You say, how do you know that, Brad? We do a little word study. Remember, it was the cedars of Lebanon that were used to build the temple, wasn't it? These were massive trees. The text says, he moves his tail like a cedar. So let me ask you, that look like a cedar to you? Not exactly. How about that? Not exactly. It's getting a whole lot closer, isn't it? The very next chapter, Job chapter 41. Can you draw a Leviathan with a hook? So now we're talking about a new creature. Before we go on, let's pause for just a moment. Let somebody say, you know, Brad, maybe these are figurative or imaginary creatures. Let me call to your mind for just a moment what's actually happening in the context right here. God is questioning Job. He's saying, how did I do this? How did I make this? Why would he then turn to two imaginary creatures? Furthermore, notice he doesn't just describe the creature, he describes the environment they live in. Take a look at this one. It says, can you put a reed through his nose or pierce his jaw with a hook? Though the sword reaches him, it cannot avail. Nor does the spear dart or javelin. Darts are regarded as straw, bronze as rotten wood. His undersides are like sharp pieces of pottery. On earth there is nothing like him which is made without fear. He beholds every high thing. What's a Leviathan? And again, somebody may say, well, my Bible says it's an alligator, a crocodile. I think the true description starts in verse 18. His sneezing splash forth light. His eyes are like the eyelids of morning. Out of his mouth go burning lights. Sparks of fire shoot out. Smoke goes out of his nostrils as from a boiling pot and burning rushes. His breath kindles coals, and a flame of fire goes out of his mouth. Can a 10-year-old child tell me what I just described? Do we have historical records of dragons in just about every ancient culture on the planet? Oh yeah. Let me give you a couple of examples. We go back to 1271. Marco Polo. I always tell the young people, this is not the game you play in a swimming pool. This is an explorer. Marco Polo, he went to China. Reported the Chinese emperor raised dragons to pull his chariot. In the year 1611, guess what? They put it in writing. They actually initiated the post of royal dragon feeder. You see, wait a second, is this guy saying that dragons are real? No, actually what I'm doing is I'm just showing you a little bit of the evidence. Evidence whether it be in, for instance, literature or ancient artwork. You say, whoa, time out. You gonna say that these things were like real? It's two things I know. With every cell in my body. Number one, I know beyond the shadow of a doubt and can prove this book is inspired by God. And number two, I know both of these creatures are in this book. You say, but that's good, brother, but you still haven't resolved the whole smoke and fire thing. Well, folks, as I see it, you got to have two things. You got to have a gas and you got to have a way to ignite it, don't you? Do we have animals today on this planet that will produce, say, methane gas? Oh, yeah. You'll be happy to know that our federal government spent millions of tax dollars measuring how much methane gas cows belch. Yeah, they're worried about the greenhouse, so you guys can sleep better tonight knowing. In fact, I tell people, you think you got a bad job, you'd be thankful you weren't holding a burp meter on Monday morning in front of a cow. Now, you extrapolate from a cow up to a dinosaur. You think that guy can produce a little bit of methane? Yeah. all you got to have is a way to ignite it. Have we found dinosaur fossils that have elegant empty horns? We don't have a clue what they stored in those horns. Parasaurolophus, for instance. What about this? Do we have animals that will purposefully go down into the Amazon River, picking up rocks and sand in their teeth, purposefully producing a spark? Folks, listen to me. This world's filled with the handiwork of God. Some of which goes beyond explanation. Have you ever honestly thought about an electric eel? The fact that it lives in water and delivers 500 volts. That'd be like going into the bathtub with 20 toasters. Don't do it, obviously. But think about that. This guy lives his whole life in the water. He delivers 500 volts on demand. He doesn't shock himself. He doesn't shock his mate when he reproduces. And he recharges himself without an extension cord. What about the bottom pictures? I got to ask because obviously I'm a little bit out of my home state. You guys have what we call lightning bugs up here? Okay. We call them lightning bugs back home. You know when you catch one, does it burn your hand? You know why? They produce cold light. You know, every form of light that man has ever produced, even fluorescence, we lose a lot of the energy to heat. You know Oak Ridge, Tennessee? They're paying little kids 25 cents each for 25 cents per lightning bug. You don't know why? Because they're trying to replicate the light. Somebody says, okay, you still got a problem. Because wasn't Job a post-flood book? And by that I mean this. We believe that the book of Job was actually one of the very first books written. But the events of Job happened after the flood. You're going to stand up here and tell us God created man and dinosaurs on day 6. That's what the book says. And then you're going to point out the behemoth and Leviathan in the book of Job that happened after the flood. Wouldn't that mean, yep, they had to be on that boat? Now, before you put me in a padded room, give me just a moment to explain. Is it possible that God allowed Noah to take juvenile animals on that boat? You ever thought about that? Because they have less space, they eat less food, they produce less waste. What was the purpose of the animals when they got off the boat? You'd want to have animals with a long reproductive life ahead of them, right? Now, young people, I want you to think about this for just a moment, okay? All the teens. I had a guy who came up and laughed at my face and said, "You actually believe in the Noah and the flood thing?" I love stuff like that because I've got like reams of research on it. I said, "Absolutely. Why? What's the problem?" He said, "So you're going to believe this fairy tale about 8 people on a boat with all the animals?" I said, "Uh-huh." He said, "That's ludicrous." I said, "Actually, when you consider you believe everything came from a single-celled organism, and you're willing to give me 8 people and all the different kinds," I said, "I'll take mine, thank you very much." Think about that, folks. Evolution. Evolution's telling us we all came from one thing, and yet this dude has a problem with thinking that we have 2 of every kind. So is it possible that... Absolutely. You think about it for just a moment. I don't say this in any disrespect. I don't think there were any animals on that boat that were holding AARP cards. Because I think they were all young. You know what a dinosaur comes from? An egg, right? Largest dinosaur egg we've ever discovered would fit very cleanly in both of my hands. So is it possible God allowed Noah to take juveniles? Absolutely. I'll share this with you all. I'm far enough away from Arkansas. If you guys are from Arkansas, I'll repent right now. Please don't meet me in the parking lot. I used to travel with 2 things. I would carry around with me one of the Ica stones, an actual one, and a dinosaur egg. Then 9/11 happened, TSA started, and it started getting more and more and more of a headache every time I'm going through security because I would keep them in my flight bag. So I'm coming out of Little Rock. Again, if you're from Arkansas, I repent. I get on the other side of the metal detectors, and there's a TSA guy. He's holding both of them. He's got the Ike stone in one hand, egg in the other. He's like, "What are these?" I said, "Well, that's an Ike stone. It's an archaeological fact, and that's a dinosaur egg." And he's looking at the dinosaur egg, looks at me, looks at the dinosaur egg, looks at me. He says, "Is he still in there?" Only in Arkansas. As I see it, we've only got about one question left, and that is what happened to him. Now, I wish that I could just stand up here and say, all the dinosaurs died out because of blank, and give you an answer. But the reality of it is we don't know for sure. And I don't have a problem looking every single one of you in the eye and saying, we don't know for sure. In fact, I think it's kind of refreshing to hear people occasionally admit that we don't know everything. We got theories. In fact, about every 6 months or so you hear another one. To my knowledge, there are 27 theories of what killed the dinosaurs. The one your kids are going to hear the most about is that asteroid. Now, that asteroid to me causes more problems than answers, because think about it. How do you selectively kill animals all over the globe and leave amphibians that have a more permeable skin? Number 2, you got an exploding star. Number 3, the Earth's climate became too warm, too cold, too dry, too wet for the dinosaurs' health. Number 4, change in the dinosaurs' diet resulted in weakened eggshells that broke after being laid. Sad to say, number 5 really is a scientific theory. A laxative plant, the dinosaurs died, disappeared, and they all died of constipation. I'll let you decide if that one was probable, possible, or pitiful. What do I think happened? Folks, I don't think anybody in this room, in all seriousness, can truly grasp when God said everything was very good. I don't think we get it. I don't think we can get it. I think He made a creation that was very good. And I think in those conditions, they thrived. You know, we look at the fossil record of the Sahara Desert. You know what we find in the fossil record? That used to be a rainforest. We look at Antarctica. You know what Antarctica tells us? Underneath the ice, you can actually see it under the ice. There's palm trees and fruit trees under the ice. You know what that tells me? It hadn't always been a frozen barren wasteland. I think everything was very good. And then I think God rained down His fury on sin. And I think those dinosaurs were on the boat. If you do the math, they were on the boat for 371 days. They come off, look around. Now, you guys know what floods do, right? You see the damage, all the silt, all the destruction. Think about a global flood that not only is a destructive flood, but it changes quite literally the weather patterns. All of a sudden, we've got an ice age that's kicked off. I think they walked off and they looked around and said, we're not in Kansas anymore. And being large, cold-blooded creatures, they needed lots of vegetation. Suddenly those little warm-blooded, fuzzy mammals started thriving. And folks, listen to me. I believe the evidence I showed you tonight proves that they made it for several thousand years post-flood. But I think eventually two things got them. Number 1, changing climate made it where they didn't thrive again. Number 2, what has man always done to animals we fear? We hunt them. Take a look with me. Open your Bibles to Genesis 1. Genesis chapter 1. Look at verses 29 and 30. God said, see, I've given you every herb that yields seed, which is on the face of all the earth. Every tree whose fruit yields seed, to you it shall be for food. Also to every beast of the earth, to every bird of the air, to everything that creeps on the earth in which there is life, I've given every green herb for food. And it was so. What were both man and animals? We were vegetarian. Now, think about that for just a moment. Does that help us understand? That helps us understand how the dinosaurs and men could have coexisted. They're both vegetarian. Helps me understand how you can get all the animals on the boat without them eating each other. They're all vegetarian. Helps me understand how Noah could get the food necessary. They're all vegetarian. Now look at Genesis 9, verse 3. Right after the flood. God here making His promise to Noah. Verse 3, He says, every moving thing that lives shall be food for you. I've given you all things, even as the green herbs. So, following the flood, Noah says what? I have to barbecue. So, okay, we're 20 years post-flood. Noah walks out and says, boys, go get us something to eat. Shem, Japheth walk out. They see a squirrel. For all the young people, squirrel. They see, they'll get it. They see a possum. And they see a stegosaurus. And they're thinking, he's small and greasy. And we'll leave him for the people in Arkansas. We could eat on that guy for a week. Guys, my point is this. When our kids come to us with questions about these amazing creatures, they're looking for answers. And if you do not give them an answer, they will get their answer from somewhere, I promise you. But it may be from somebody who's wearing a white starched lab coat who has absolutely no belief in a God. Before I open it up for your questions, let's touch on one last little topic. Was it really an ice age? I mean, everybody in this room remembers studying the land bridge between Alaska and Asia. You remember that? So we say, all right, if we can fit dinosaurs in here, how do we fit that in here? Folks, absolutely there was an ice age. Not a soul in this world that can deny it. Next week, I'll be, Lord willing, standing in a valley that was actually carved out by the glaciers. Can't deny it, folks. I mean, when those glaciers came down, they carved U-shaped valleys. They grabbed all the rocks and the sand in their leading edge. And when the glaciers finally retreated, they left horseshoe-shaped till mounds, or moraines, as we call them. You can go to Alaska today, you can put your hand on one. Last month I was up in Canada on the Columbia ice field, standing on one. You can't deny it. Somebody says, all right, did they cover the entire earth? They covered a third. By that I mean they covered a sixth of the top and a sixth of the bottom. All right, how do they fit in to the Bible? If you have your Bible, go ahead and open it up to Genesis chapter 7. And I'm going to tell Chris that his thing is blinking. Yep. You want to switch? Or have you got some more time?
I'll switch. I got 4 minutes.
You got, okay.
Yeah.
Genesis chapter 7, verse 11 is telling us where the water from the flood came from. It says, on that day all the fountains of the great deep were broken up and the windows of heaven were opened. I want you to notice two things out of this portion of the text. Number one, it says things are broken up. It tells me that God is quite literally tearing apart tectonic plates. But it also says it's in the great deep. As you get deeper in the earth's crust, do you get hotter or colder? Hotter. That's where the lava is. That's where the mantle is. Folks, if you're tearing apart tectonic plates in the great deep, you're going to have volcanoes going off quite literally all over the planet. You remember Mount St. Helens erupted 30 years ago last year. It was 30 years ago, believe it. Yes, you are that old. It blew ash. You guys may have even got a little bit of residual here. I don't know. Can you imagine not just one volcano, but multiple volcanoes going off, both on land and in the ocean? What do you get? You get the perfect recipe for an ice age. What do you have to have in order to have an ice age? Number one, you've got to have increased evaporation. How do you get more moisture in the air? You warm up the ocean with that lava. But this is the tricky part. At the same time, you've got to cool off the land. How do you do that? With the ash. Anybody in here remember the term nuclear winter? You remember that? You remember they were afraid if we launched bombs that it would put ash up in the sky and it would result in a false winter. Well, guess what? We got an ice age that we believe lasted 350 to 500 years post-flood. So check this out. Here's the cool part. We're post-flood, we're pre-Abraham. We know that people are smart enough to build with bricks because the Bible indicates that. What was the next major account right after the flood? We talked about it. Tower of Genesis 11 verse 8. So the Lord scattered them abroad from there over the face of all the earth. Here's the cool part. When that's written, Ice Age is still going on. You could have walked from Europe into Asia, down into Africa, down through India into Australia, across the land bridge into North America and South America. You don't know how God distributed the people and the animals after the flood? There's your answer right there. You want to know how the Native Americans, the Mayans, the Aztecs, how they got to this continent? There's your answer right there, folks. It's biblical and it's scientific. We've just got to get it into the hearts and minds of our kids. I'm going to stop right there. And I'm going to let Chris swap the tape. And then I'm going to open it up for your questions. If you've got comments you want to write on it, for those of you who don't like talking in public,